President, are we in a quorum call?
We are.
I'd ask that we dispense with the quorum call.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm one of the few parents of young children in the Senate, but almost every one of us here is a parent. And so you know that one of the most spectacular things your kid can do is to write you a letter. Sometimes, frankly, most of the time when I've gotten those letters, it's because my kid wants to protest something that I've done. I've gotten a few of those where my kids are so upset about a rule or a decision that we've made as parents that they sit down and they catalog their grievances on paper. Maybe if you're lucky, you get a nice letter. My in-laws have one still plastered up on their wall from their youngest daughter, who wrote them a nice list when she was young about the things she appreciated. But those dear mommy or dear daddy letters, that's one of the rare joys of parenthood. On March 6th, 2018, Patricia Veerbeek awoke to find one of those letters for her, left by her child, Eric. It was laying on the pillow of his bed. She picked it up and she read it to herself. "Dear Mommy," her child wrote. Maybe her eyes twinkled, thinking of what sweet or funny thoughts might come next. But this is what the letter said. "Dear Mommy, I'm sorry to do this to you, but I have killed myself by jumping off the top floor, the 12th floor of your building, at the nearest stair exit to the elevators on that floor. I felt I could no longer live my life as a lie, living as a boy, instead of the girl I know I could become. I'm sorry I lied to you. I was losing hope in the world and could not see my way out of the wrong body. And I decided it was time for my life to end." As you might imagine, Patricia didn't get beyond that first line. Upon reading it, she dropped the letter and she ran straight to her balcony. And below, she saw the vague outline of a body and police officers surrounding it. I follow President Trump's family members on social media. I do it because I know how influential they are. I know how many Americans, good, decent Americans, admire them and listen to what they say. And lately, the posts from Trump's family members have just been of one theme. America should fear transgender children. The Trump family and their network of supporters and sycophants have decided that Eric Veerbeek and other kids like them are the number one problem facing America today. And over the past year, this crowd has orchestrated a relentless and unceasing campaign to marginalize, demonize, and bully kids whose gender identity is different from their biological sex. Mr. President, this year alone, Republican state legislators across the country have introduced 150 bills to deny rights to transgender Americans. Today, the Alabama legislature introduced legislation that is fast-tracked, from what I understand, to become law, that makes it a felony for a doctor to provide health care to a transgender child. In Texas, the governor directed his child welfare agency to investigate parents like Patricia who are simply determined to support their children if they help them secure the gender-affirming treatment that they need. Criminalizing parents of transgender children is just around the corner in some states. In Congress, Trump's allies spend more time talking about transgender kids than they spend time talking about health care or taxes or education. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, perhaps Trump's best ally in the House, had a sign outside her office calling the experience of trans people a fiction just to bully her hallway neighbor, Representative Marie Newman, who has a transgender daughter. And in the Supreme Court hearings here last month, at least one senator used their time on the national stage to suggest that the entire idea of being transgender is a left-wing hoax. All across America, Republicans, not all Republicans, but the Trump wing of the Republican Party, has declared a war against transgender kids. And these children have noticed. A recent survey of transgender youth showed that half of them, 52%, had contemplated suicide over the last year. Just think about that for a second, my colleagues. Half of all the kids who are transgender come to the conclusion at some point in their young lives that they would be better off dead than live in a world that believes they are threats to be marginalized or expunged. That's a national crisis. And we need to talk honestly and candidly about what has led us to this moment. We need to start by acknowledging that this conversation is long overdue. This dialogue about transgender children, it may feel new, but transgender kids aren't. Transgender adults aren't. The only difference between today and, say, 50 years ago is that today there is space for kids and adults to be open about who they truly are. We are all born with a biological sex. And centuries of tightly controlled constructs about what a man should be and what a man should act like and what a woman should be and what a woman should act like. They've sorted human beings into personality and professional profiles based on that gender. But there are many of us, this has been the case for human history, who don't associate with the gender that biological chance ascribed to us. There are people who are assigned male at birth who feel in their bones that they are female. That's what Eric felt. That's what Eric knew. And there are people who are assigned female at birth, but no, they just know that they're male. And there's nothing wrong with that. That process of figuring out which gender you identify with, it poses no threat to anyone. But, Mr. President, we do have to acknowledge how hard it is, given those centuries of gender identity and stereotypes, for some Americans to understand what a kid like Eric was going through. For Americans, for instance, who were born a male and feel like a male, and who are surrounded by family and friends who associate with the gender that matches the sex they were born into, the whole notion of a boy becoming a girl or a girl becoming a boy, I get it. That can be disconcerting. It can be difficult to understand. But I also know that this discomfort will pass as more Americans learn what I've learned. Transgender and non-binary children aren't any different than any other kids. You might not know a transgender or non-binary kid, but trust me, you do. You know what these kids are like because they are no different than any other children. My son has transgender and non-binary friends. He has non-transgender friends. But when they're all sitting around our kitchen after school, there's no difference between them in terms of how they act and how they talk, what they're like, what they don't like. They are kids. They are just kids. And so here's my message to the adults with power who have decided to spend their days bullying these kids. Stop it. Grow up. So you're not ready to accept transgender people. Fine. I hope you come around someday. But these kids threaten no one. They are hurting no one. And well, there are important conversations we need to have about how we include transgender kids fully in sports. I could walk into a room of 1,000 people in my state, ask how many of them have had a child lose a sporting event to a transgender girl, and not a single hand would raise. Saving girls' sports is not the reason why Donald Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene and their whole political movement has made bullying transgender kids their top priority. No, it's their top priority because they know hate and fear of what some people don't understand has a habit of selling in this country. I wish that weren't true, but it's always been true. There's always going to be a constituency in America that will listen to an argument for why black people or Mexicans or Muslims or gay people or transgender people are ruining America, why we should fear them. It's not true. It's never been true. But demagogues and their movements, they tend not to have actual ideas, things they're for. Demagogues normally just focus on what they hate. Let me say it again. Half of all transgender children in this country have thought to themselves at some point that they would be better off dead than live in a world where so many people fear them. That is heartbreaking to know that we're doing that to these kids. Being a teenager today, I know I have one. With social media and the pandemic, it is hard enough. But imagine being a teenager who wakes up every day knowing that they aren't the gender they were assigned by biology at birth. Imagine keeping your feelings about that secret for years, worried about what your parents or your friends might say. Imagine the anguish of a scared 12-year-old or 14-year-old sitting in bed, awake for hours each night, trying to process all of that alone with no help. Imagine the courage it then takes for that kid to have the first conversation with a parent or a friend. And then layer on top of that some of the most powerful people in the world deciding to use their power not to cure disease or end poverty or hunger, but instead to use their power to target those very scared, desperate kids and to use their powers to harass and bully and shame them. Imagine how small, how insecure, how weak a person must be to have all that power and to use it to bully children. Seth Walsh was gay, not transgender, but his experience was not much different than Eric's. Students at his school were systematic in their targeting of him because of his sexual orientation. They pushed him down the stairs, they kicked him until he was badly bruised, they screamed at him, they called him names. No doubt these bullies took direction and inspiration from adults who paved the way, who endorsed this kind of hateful behavior. One day after one of these incidents, a frightened Seth called his mom and he said, "Mom, you have to come get me right now." His mom could hear the fear in his voice, and so he grabbed Seth's little brother. They got in the car and they rushed to pick him up. His mom was so supportive. That afternoon they sat and they talked. Seth took a shower to calm himself down, and afterward he asked his mom for a pen and told her that he was going to go outside and play with the dogs. About 10 minutes later, his mom went outside to continue this conversation with her son. But it was too late. Seth had hung himself from a tree. The pen he asked for was for the suicide note. I tell you these stories because they are consequences of adults' behavior. Donald Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene and their ilk, they aren't murderers. But make no mistake, there is a direct through line from the hateful words and the policies of leaders and the misery that too many transgender, non-binary, and gay kids are going through today. But I'm also here to tell you that Trump and Taylor Greene, others like them, they are not the majority. And I want to make sure that I finish by sending a message to transgender children and adults that these hateful people, this movement that is growing out there to try to target you, it's not going to win. We are going to build a community of love and protection for you. No matter how bad things may seem right now, they're going to get better. The world is going to get kinder. Adults are going to learn their lessons. And if you don't have it now, as you are struggling with your identity, you will find a support structure that will nurture and support you. It's out there for you. You should be who you are. Don't feel like you need to hide your true self just because of these idiot adults who feel big by bullying people that are different from them. Be who you are and know that there are a whole lot of us who are going to work our tails off to support you, to love you, and to make sure that you get a chance to thrive. Because in the long run, the bullies never win. They never do. Yield the floor. Mr. President.
The senator from Connecticut.
Mr. President, I would first ask unanimous consent that the appointment at the desk appear separately in the record as if made by the chair.
Without objection.
I'd ask unanimous consent that the injunction of secrecy be removed from the following treaty transmitted to the Senate on April 7th, 2022 by the President of the United States. The extradition treaty with the Republic of Albania, treaty document number 1172. I further ask that the treaty be considered as having been read the first time, that it be referred with accompanying papers to the Committee on Foreign Relations and ordered to be printed, and that the President's message be printed in the record.
Without objection.
I'd ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to executive session to consider the following nominations en bloc. Calendars numbers 646, 790, 814, 863, 864. That the Senate vote on the nominations en bloc without intervening action or debate. The motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table. That any statements related to the nominations be printed in the record. That the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action and the Senate resume legislative session.
Is there objection? Without objection. The question occurs on the nomination en bloc. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Nominations are confirmed en bloc.
Mr. President, I have 5 requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders.
Duly noted.
Mr. President, I'd ask unanimous consent that, notwithstanding the upcoming adjournment of the Senate, the President of the Senate, the President pro temp of the majority and minority leaders be authorized to make appointments to commissions, committees, boards, conferences, or interparliamentary conferences authorized by law by concurrent action of the 2 houses or by order of the Senate.
Without objection.
I'd ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar number 304, S2687.
Clerk will report.
Calendar number 307, S2687, a bill to provide the Inspector General of the Department of Veterans Affairs testimonial subpoena authority and for other purposes.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection, the Senate will proceed.
Mr. President, I'd ask unanimous consent that the tester substitute amendment at the desk be considered and agreed to.
Without objection,
I ask unanimous consent that the bill as amended be considered read a third time.
without objection.
I know of no further debate on the bill as amended.
Is there further debate? If not, the question is on passage of the bill. As amended, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The bill as amended is passed.
I would ask that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Veterans Affairs Committee be discharged from further consideration of S. 1875 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report.
S. 1875, a bill to amend Title 38 United States Code to provide a deadline of 180 days for the filing of claims for payment for emergency treatment furnished to veterans and for other purposes.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection, the Senate will proceed.
I ask unanimous consent that the round substitute amendment at the desk be considered and agreed to, the bill as amended be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the consideration of calendar number 323, Senate Resolution 503.
The clerk will report.
Calendar number 323, S-Res 503, expressing the sense of the Senate that the government of the People's Republic of China should immediately guarantee the safety and freedom of tennis star Ping Shui.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection, the Senate will proceed.
I ask unanimous consent the committee reported amendment to the resolution be agreed to.
Is there objection? Without objection.
I know of no further debate, Mr. President, on the resolution as amended.
Is there further debate? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The resolution as amended is agreed to.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the committee reported amendment to the preamble be agreed to, the preamble as amended be agreed to, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I'd ask unanimous consent that the Judiciary Committee be discharged from further consideration of S. 3823 and that the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report.
S. 3823, a bill to amend Title 11 United States Code to modify the eligibility requirements for a debtor under Chapter 13 and for other purposes.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection, the Senate will proceed.
I would ask now unanimous consent that the Grassley substitute amendment at the desk be considered and agreed to, the bill as amended be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Without objection.
I would ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar number 317, S3785.
The clerk will report.
Calendar number 317, S3785, a bill to amend Title 49 United States Code to eliminate the restriction on veterans concurrently serving in the offices of Administrator and Deputy Administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection, the Senate will proceed.
I ask unanimous consent that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of S. 4070, which was introduced earlier today.
The clerk will report.
S. 4070, a bill to designate the National Air Grant Fellowship Program as the Samuel Rose Stumo National Air Grant Fellowship Program.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection, the Senate will proceed.
I would ask unanimous consent that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Without objection.
I now ask the chair lay before the Senate the message to accompany S658.
The chair lays before the Senate following a message from the House.
Resolved that the bill from the Senate, S658, entitled An Act to Authorize the Secretary of Homeland Security to work with cybersecurity consortia for training and for other purposes, do pass with an amendment.
I would move to concur in the House amendment, and I ask unanimous consent that the motion be agreed to and that the motion to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table.
Is there objection? Without objection.
I would now ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the consideration of S-Res 592 submitted earlier today.
The clerk will report.
S-Res 592 designating April 6, 2022 as National Assistive Technology Awareness Day.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection.
I would ask unanimous consent that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and that the motions to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
I would now ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the consideration of S-Res 593 submitted earlier today.
The clerk will report.
S-Res 593 relating to the death of Canister Hodges, Jr., former United States Senator for the state of Arkansas.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection, the Senate will proceed.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and that the motions to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
I would now ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Armed Services be discharged from further consideration, and the Senate now proceed to S-Res 533.
The clerk will report.
Senate Resolution 533 celebrating the centennial of Navy aircraft carriers.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection, the committee is discharged and the Senate will proceed.
I would ask unanimous consent now that the resolution be agreed to, the Kane amendment to the preamble be agreed to, the preamble as amended be agreed to, and that the motions to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table.
Without objection.